Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle Longton, and I'm here to continue our next chapter conversation on healthy aging, and specifically our book discussion on Elderhood by Louise Aronson. If you've been following along on our website or on the Facebook page for next chapter conversations, you'll see that we posted a video, but we also posted some discussion questions, and we've had a little bit of input, some of it from me, but we thought maybe a video might be good to get the discussion going. And even if you haven't read the book or haven't read all of it yet, that's fine. I'd love to know what you're thinking and would love to hear from you on your thoughts about some of the questions. So I wanted to take this opportunity to share some of my thoughts about the first section of the book, specifically the birth section and then the childhood section. There's also an adulthood, an elderhood, and finally a brief section, death, the way that the author has the book structured. But one of the pieces that Dr. Aronson explores throughout the first parts of the book is, how do we define old or elderly? Are we looking at a number? Is it the presence of a health condition? Is it some combination of the two? But what does that mean to you? For me, when I was a kid, old didn't mean my grandparents. It meant my great grandmother and her sister who lived in Florida. They were retired. Turns out they were only in their 80s, but they seemed older than that. They sometimes used a walker. They would, yes, absolutely take out gallon-size Ziploc bags when we would go to the buffet with them, and take some home. But they also seemed very happy and were very active and socially active. They lived together and had a great time and were always joking. So they seemed old compared to me when I was, a toddler, but they also seemed very still full of life. But I look at myself now as I'm approaching 40 and feel old. I feel it in my body. I see it as my hair's graying, not just because it came earlier than my dad's gray came or my mom's gray. Um, but I guess it's one thing that just that number alone doesn't define a person, and age alone doesn't define a person. Dr. Aronson also talked about something that really hit home for me in my work for both the Senior Living Foundation and for AFSPA, particularly for our Foreign Service Benefit Plan. And she wrote that the daily, often fruitless battle against structural forces to get my patients what they needed. She wrote about that and touched on it in several other places, including when she said that most of her patients could not get the sorts of things that would have made them more comfortable, more functional, healthier, and happier. How often do we run into that? Our health insurance, the way it's structured, is absolutely happy to pay for an emergency room visit, a stay in the hospital. But when it comes to certain things at home, for instance, somebody come in to help with basic tasks, that's a different type of insurance. There's maybe long-term care insurance that kicks in for that many people don't have. There's also just basic things like a grab bar. There's been some talk in the news recently about a Senate hearing where they discuss bath mats, non-slip bath mats, things that can make life just a little bit easier, but they're not necessarily considered medically necessary, so they don't fall under insurance. And so how do we help that? The Senior Living Foundation is there to help with that. We've done that many times, including installing the grab bar, including doing a safety assessment, even helping rent a ramp for access to the home so people can be safe in their own home. We also run into it on the health insurance side where benefits aren't there for certain things. It's not what health insurance is designed to do. And so finding a way to meet, for Dr. Aronson, patients' needs, but for all of us who are living this, who are doing it for loved ones, who hear about it in the news, it can be a real challenge to find that balance and figure out exactly how to meet those needs, and how to come up against what Dr. Aronson called structural forces. One of the other things that also struck out to me, um, I guess I should say stood out to me, was touching on what we now call the social determinants of health, or SDOHs, for all ages. She wrote in the toddler chapter about throughout history, the experience of being old has been shaped by economics, social priorities, medical knowledge and technology, and our beliefs about life and death. And we find this more and more, and some of it's faded in the last year. There's less of a focus on it. But we still find that zip code, that certain factors that are outside our determination, that come with how we're born, whether it's our gender, our race, our ethnic background, the geographic location where we grow up, where we're born, where our family is rooted, can play a huge role in how we are able to access care. Um, and sometimes that can become even more of a factor as we age, whether it's living in a food desert, being at a great distance from medical care. I'd be interested to hear your experience, either for yourselves or for loved ones, about such factors and how they influence people at a particular age or stage of life. It could be childhood, toddlers, this chapter was called, not being close to medical care at that age, or as we age and require care more frequently. All right, spoiler alert here. For the child chapter in the book, there is a story about a patient named Dimitri. So, if you haven't read it, this story probably will sound familiar. She encountered Dimitri, the author encountered Dimitri once, and she found that he was almost comatose. He couldn't speak, he couldn't do much of the activities of daily living for himself. And she dug into his file and found that treatment for one condition, prescription drug, led to side effects which required an additional prescription, which caused side effects, which led to another prescription. It was a chain reaction. And it was different doctors who were prescribing this or taking just one particular need and addressing that need rather than looking at the whole person and figuring out where these things would be. She also addressed in the story something that's come up for me at recent conferences, and that is just sort of who's involved in clinical studies. It's not often the people who are typically taking the drugs. Um, and I'm just curious, the author writes, new symptoms are often too often attributed to age and disease rather than to care or drugs that actually cause them. What's your experience with this been like? Have you seen this with a loved one? Have you had this challenge yourself? And how have you addressed it? Have you felt empowered to address it? At the end of the child chapter, the author describes the shift in the 19th century. This stood out to me when Americans began viewing the body as a machine and not a divine gift. How do you think we approach the human body today, especially in the later stages of life? For me, I appreciate the phrase divine gift in this instance. Machine made me think about the foot bone being connected to the ankle bone, being connected to the shin bone, and so on. And a machine approach maybe go back to the story with Dimitri, and causes us to focus on that single symptom or problem in favor of considering the whole person. Sometimes a partnership with a primary care physician can help, and that's been the case for me as I've battled some connected and sometimes seemingly disconnected medical issues in recent years. But having my primary care physician keep an eye on everything and help connect the pieces for me as well as for my other doctors has been incredibly valuable. But it's not always easy. And as we get older and problems multiply, being in the doctor so often, keeping that relationship, keeping up with everything becomes even more challenging. So I'm just curious what your experience with this has been like. And I just wanted to call out something in the tween chapter where Dr. Aronson described a colleague's article about their encounter with a dying woman. The colleague had spent only a few minutes admitting the patient. He and many others later felt that that time was inadequate. He knew that she was dying. There wasn't anything that could be done, but he eventually felt the time was inadequate because he realized the patient was only in her 40s. This colleague thought that the patient was much older. And so in this telling, it was fine to spend just a few minutes because the patient was older. It wasn't okay because the patient was actually in her 40s. This follows a theme of othering older people and patients that came out throughout these sections. I'm just curious what your response to this and this story and this theme have been. Please join the conversation. We've got a thread going on our Facebook page for Next Chapter Conversations. That's a great place to join us. You can find more information on our website. We also have some great other resources there to share, including a conversation with a local seniors group in the Washington, D.C. area. And we also now have a date and time for our Next Chapter conversation with Dr. Ali Khan at the end of June. He is the Chief Medical Officer for Medicare Advantage for Aetna. He sat down for a podcast with and he's going to do basically like a fireside chat. We'd love to have your questions ahead of time and to have you tune in live on the last Friday of this month. So please join us. We'd love to have you there. Join the conversation however you're able, and tell your friends if you found this valuable. We'll talk again soon.